Welcome to another edition of the Business and Personal Podcast, where we bring you closer to the people you do business with or show great stories of things going on in the community. And we're thrilled today to be joined by Chris Powers. He's the co-founder of Reciprocity. He's going to tell us all about how he's connecting people for the greater good, basically, is what they're doing. So, first of all, Chris, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, it's the Business and Personal Podcast. So, tell people a little bit about yourself and what eventually led you to Reciprocity.
Yeah, thanks for that. The story of Reciprocity is really kind of deeply personal for me. Sort of a story of college friendship and a story of being invested in community. So I grew up in sort of a multi-generational community where neighbors looked out for each other. And I think I benefited from that tremendously, where I had mentors who were older than me, and if people needed help in general, the neighborhood kind of rallied around them. And fast forward several years later, I ended up meeting my now co-founder, Cam Underdown, on the campus of Oakland University. Again, he was doing like a word of mouth open mic night, and he was always very active and very involved in rallying people together and building up community and building up fellowship among the various people who were living on campus. And fast forward around 15 years after we graduated, which hard to believe that it's been that long, but when the pandemic broke out and the governor's executive order shut down a lot of essential service nonprofits, a lot of people were in crisis because unemployment and joblessness and need was rising at precisely the time when a lot of the organizations that were designated to help folks who were in a struggle ended up shutting down. And so my co-founder Cam launched a little website called My COVID Response, which very quickly became a rallying point for thousands of volunteers and over 10,000 people who were in need, who were requesting things like food assistance, rental assistance, childcare, and so on during the pandemic. And essentially, that website became sort of a rallying point and a matchmaking system where we could mobilize volunteers to be able to help our neighbors in need. And we had about 80 organizations join that effort. And a lot of people sort of stood up to help their neighbors during a time of crisis.
Love to hear a story like that. As bad as COVID was, there's also been a lot of positive, I think, that has come out of that. But, just in your simplest terms for maybe someone from an organization that's watching this, trying to figure out how you could help them out, what is the ways that you, Reciprocity, can assist an organization?
Yeah, great question. So after that pandemic related work, where we ended up connecting over 15,000 people throughout Southeast Michigan with a direct to the door sort of food delivery program, a lot of nonprofits locally took notice and thought that was pretty cool and asked us to build systems to help scale their back office in order to meet the needs of their community. And so we've done a lot of custom software development projects in areas, in a bunch of different areas, from education and youth enrichment to food access to housing and homelessness prevention. And ultimately, I think the way that organizations can interface with us is if you run a direct service nonprofit, or if you have an idea for how you want to improve your community. I maybe can leave some links to our contact information in the show notes for your listeners to reach out. But essentially, we kind of have a three-step approach to the way we work with organizations. The first is we go on the ground and go to the place where the needs are most acutely felt. I think now folks would call that human-centered design, but essentially we go right to where people are experiencing the problems, either with resource access or with poverty or with homelessness or with other types of issues. And then we work alongside the people who are trying to coordinate resources on their behalf and figure out where sort of the breakdowns or the linkages are not happening, and then try to build software systems that bridge those gaps. And after we kind of work out a lot of the bugs with those prototypes, then we move to more scalable frameworks that we can talk about in a little bit.
So your programs now have helped 33,000 people across 13,000 households. Can you just give a few examples of stories from your work?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I think especially during the pandemic and in general, there are just so many sort of inspiring stories of people who sort of came together to help those in a time of need. There's a couple examples, maybe. I think the first is the food program that we started. A brilliant public health professor named Jennifer Lucarelli helped us launch it from the floor of Oakland University. And that program is now run full time by a large nonprofit called Lighthouse under the domain called Lighthouse Direct if you wanted to volunteer or donate for that. But that essentially is like a last mile coordination system for like food deliveries for people who have transportation challenges. Um, I think many of the most inspiring stories came to us from our volunteers. So when volunteers would go and do food deliveries or they would go and try to connect with their neighbors who needed help, it might be anything from maybe someone is having trouble with their car or they're facing a utility shut off or they have a complicated system and they need help and a volunteer or a qualified organization can step in and give them assistance at a really crucial time. Um, we also had sort of a really sad story of a volunteer who essentially ended up finding a mother who had passed out due to some medical issues. And actually, I mean, the good part of the story is that she ended up saving the woman's life, and then now her and her daughter are just fine and have kind of gotten back on their feet and are on a better road. But I think a lot of the connections and a lot of the stories that we've heard about or learned about or have seen are when you have two people coming together and forming a mutually beneficial relationship that can then sort of help both people. And so I think by bringing together a lot of volunteers in this network and bringing together people who want to work and volunteer and contribute to the public good, that the communities where we've built and launched programs have ended up stronger as a result.
Fantastic. So, what are some of the organizations that would work best with reciprocity? And are you able to work with anybody anywhere in the world?
Yeah, great question. We're primarily US focused and primarily operating in Southeast Michigan right now, although we hope with the launch of our flagship product called Advocate that will scale to be more national in terms of its scope. But essentially, we work alongside with direct service nonprofits. And so what that means is a nonprofit organization that's looking to provide community resources or looking to fill the needs of their stakeholders in a community. So that might be a food pantry, that might be someone who's helping to coordinate housing and homelessness prevention resources, that might be a youth enrichment organization that's doing back to school programs or youth recreation, et cetera. And in general, I would say the types of nonprofit organizations that we like to work for would be if organization X is trying to get community resource Y to population Z. So that's maybe a way to think about it. There are plenty of different kinds of nonprofits that may or may not necessarily serve the public good, but we're kind of most focused on helping the types of institutions that are out there to help the community.
So, what are some of the projects you're working on right now and your goals for reciprocity going forward?
Yeah, great question. So a couple of our big initiatives that we're kicking off, both kind of starting in July 1st, are we're launching a software platform called Advocate as a direct sponsorship platform. And what that means is essentially helping to surface the needs of our community members and then through trusted nonprofits or community organizations to be able to match those individuals with donor sponsors. So essentially what we're doing with that software platform that's been tested and iterated by providing over 8,000 kids with gifts over the holidays is to say, if somebody has a need that they need met or they want to apply for a program, we make it easier for nonprofits to run those programs while also making it easier through good design for donors and participants, or kind of neighbors in need to be able to access those programs. That's the first one. So we'll have that live at advocatewithus.com. The second initiative that we're launching is to build a network across Oakland County in Michigan to sort of centralize, simplify, and streamline access to housing and homelessness prevention resources. If you or any of your listeners have ever tried to navigate the system of housing assistance, they will know that it's very challenging and very complicated. And so what we're trying to do is use good design and technology to put a lot of the resources, or as many as we can, into the same place to give people sort of a easier to comprehend roadmap for how to navigate all of the programs that they may qualify for when they're in a time of crisis.
Fantastic. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share, or just talking about the vision of Reciprocity going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the long term, we want Reciprocity to be a first class or even world class company that's building software products to help nonprofits, and in particular to help those who are on the front lines that are coordinating resources on behalf of their communities. And so a lot of nonprofit tools end up being sort of out of date, or when I describe technology to a lot of the folks that we're building for, their first reaction is like, oh no, not again. But we are, all of us at Reciprocity are nonprofit leaders first, who are building software tools that we wish existed for ourselves, and that sort of surprise and delight the people that we're trying to help. And so we really put a emphasis on making it easier for people to get access to community resources. And so we just hope, as we continue building Reciprocity into the future, that we want to build a really good company that builds excellent products for that purpose.
Chris, great work. Keep up the great work, and thanks so much for joining us.